Well, today on Focus Gaming News, we have the privilege to speak to Sandra Douglass Morgan, the chairwoman of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. Sandra, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Foley. Thank you for having me.
So just to begin with, obviously in Nevada, we've seen the majority, I think, of casinos reopening now after lockdown. How are you seeing the situation there at the moment and the reaction, the reopening to after the lockdown measures?
About 95% of the larger properties have reopened. Of course, it's very warm here right now. We're at about 115 degrees. And properties are, they're open, but obviously, there are significant restrictions due to the COVID pandemic, restricting occupancy to 50% of the floor. Depending on the county, there are certain restrictions on whether bars can be opened. And obviously, in some of our larger casinos, there are bars included throughout, whether it be the lobby or the floor itself. But for the month of June, actually, we had about a 45% decrease from June of 2019. So, things are picking up. Obviously, for a few months, everything was closed, so we had zero revenue or close to zero revenue. But for that first opening month of June, we were about 50% to where we usually are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so is that been a general response to that's a fairly good recovery considering the severity of the situation?
I think that when we reopened for the first time ever in Nevada to have gaming closed was definitely a shock to many residents and I think a lot of visitors as well. But I think that also people realized that it was serious enough to have to close it. And so I think when there was opening on June, you had a mix of Nevadans wanting to support their local gaming establishment. I know gaming is different here in Nevada than in other places. I actually grew up here, so I'm used to going to the grocery store or going to the convenience store and seeing a slot machine. There are bowling alleys and movie theaters at casinos here in our neighborhood casinos, and so I'm used to taking my children there. And you build relationships with those people and you want to support them. And so I think Nevadans, upon reopening, definitely wanted to support local gaming. And then we had a decent amount of drive-in traffic, whether it be from California or from Arizona as well, to kind of support, honestly, a lot of the gaming industry when we initially reopened. But since the first couple of weeks, we definitely see a drop in occupancy for midweek bookings, and that's simply due to there's not being a lot of conventions or other things that actually help kind of midweek rates.
Yeah, we certainly heard reports of people driving from outside of the state. People really raring to get back to the gaming floor when the casinos first opened. Did that take people by surprise? That response?
Yeah.
Were people a little bit wary of will people return to the gaming floor? Or?
Not much surprises me anymore. However, I think through the pandemic, we've realized there's definitely a different level of comfort for people. Everyone responds to this virus. Not only do our bodies respond to the virus differently, but people's just level of comfort. You're going to have some people, based on a lot of the research studies, not that the board has conducted, but based on my conversations with folks from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, certain people are going to come back as soon as the doors open, regardless as to what the percentage positive rates are. A lot of people wanted to ensure that employees were kept safe. They wanted to know what properties were doing to make sure that their patrons were safe. And some other people just kind of wanted to say, what, I'll wait until 2021, or I'll wait until the winter of 2020 and to see, what the numbers look like and to see what other protocols that gaming establishments put in place. I will say one thing about this gaming industry, though. Not only are they very resilient and innovative and being able to kind of consistently redefine themselves, but when it came to the health and safety policies, as you all know, we're learning more and more about this virus every day. And we've continually issued health and safety guidelines, obviously incorporate the governor's directives on certain closures, but a significant majority, I would say well above 80, maybe even 90% of gaming licensees take it very seriously. And they've put in practices and procedures that honestly I've shared with schools and other industries, because they're really making sure that we continue to stay the gold standard of regulation. And they know that in order to excel in customer service, which Nevada has done such a great job at doing, they have to make sure their customers are happy. And now happy means safe, right? People are being greeted with people with masks. They're being offered masks. They're being offered sanitizer. There's hand washing stations everywhere. And I think that comes along with the kind of general hospitality that people expect, that when you come to Las Vegas or when you come to Nevada, that you'll be taken care of.
I was going to ask how you see how regulators how you see how operators have responded to the pandemic and the restrictions, the controls that have been introduced. I know that there've been at least a few investigations where operators were given something of a slap on the wrist for breaches of compliance. Are you happy that those were a minority of cases, and that in the majority, operators are following the restrictions that have been
You know,
introduced?
we have over 2,000 licensees, and about 400, a little over 400 of them are considered to be larger properties. And so that the remaining ones are bars and taverns that are limited to 15 or less. And so we've definitely kind of had a saturation plan with respect to enforcement. We've used, obviously, we have 6 divisions. We do have a specific division that are law enforcement officers, and then we have auditors and tax and license agents, and actually other divisions outside of enforcement actually assisted with kind of being eyes and ears and being out there, just because we have so many properties throughout the state. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, a significant majority did comply, but some of those are going to get more than not just a slap on the wrist. They may actually break the wrist because some people, depending on, we had a mask order that went into effect. I should say mandatory face coverings. The board initially required, initially there were masks were always required for employees. There was no question about that. And then after a few weeks, we required masks for patrons at table games. About a week after that, that's when the governor of Nevada actually had a face covering mandate. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, a majority of people understand the importance of that, wanting to reduce the risk of transmission. But you may have seen in some of the complaints that we found that are public, there are just certain patrons that weren't wearing masks, and it's difficult to regulate or require a third party to comply. There has to be an effort on the business. And the governor's directive did allow businesses to refuse service to those who refuse to wear a face covering. And so businesses have the tools they need to ensure that people are not going to be in their establishment if they're not complying with the rules. And, we want to make sure that Nevada stays safe. And, gaming being such a huge part of the state, we really have to lead. And that means our operators have to lead as well.
So the pandemic has obviously had a huge economic impact both on the operators themselves, but also on Nevada as a state because of the shortfall in tax revenues that it's going to cause to generate. Is there anything that you're looking at doing from the regulators' side to help alleviate things for both operators or to help maybe find solutions for the state to make up for that shortfall in revenue?
Well, we are regulators, and so we do not kind of create any type of tax policy. That is actually done by the legislature, and they just began a special session today at 9 a.m. They concluded a prior special session about a week or so ago. Nevada is very rare in that we're in one of maybe 4 or 5 states in the United States that their legislature only meets every other year. And so the lawmakers were not scheduled to meet until early 2021, but because of the huge shortfall for the state was around $1.5 billion, they met, oh my goodness, maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago and made some unfortunate reductions, unfortunately a lot to education and healthcare in order to kind of fill that hole. This special session that was issued today is going to focus on kind of greater policy issues, obviously some election issues, social justice and police reform, those type of things. But I think that the reductions or the unfortunate reductions to social services that were made in the last couple of weeks will at least get the state to a point whereas in February, when this session regularly meets, they'll be able to address any additional shortfalls. But we've definitely looked to what the board can do within our own regulatory authority to give some relief to operators. And so we are going to propose, the board actually proposed a regulation change to allow myself to have some regulatory authority to allow certain businesses to stay closed. In Nevada, if you're a resort hotel, you have to have, depending on the county, 200 or 300 rooms, a 24-hour cafe operating at all times, a casino floor, a race and sports book. And with some of the closures and the occupancy restrictions, we've allowed some flexibility to say, okay, yes, you have to have a restaurant on site. Maybe it doesn't have to be open for 24 hours. Or you may have a hotel that has, 1,000 rooms. All of those don't have to be available for patrons. So we've tried to do what we can within our own regulatory jurisdictional powers to provide some relief to operators. have a lot of operators here that have multiple properties, and some of them have chosen not to open all of them. You've seen some kind of rolling dates, and I don't want to pick on any one, but there's a couple of them that haven't opened, maybe 2 or 3. Giving them some flexibility instead of having to continuously notify us that it's going to be closed, to give them kind of some administrative approval for 3 months until things get back to what are I don't like the term new normal, but some sense of normalness again.
Yeah.
Also allow those properties who are closed to pay taxes just on one machine or one table game while they're closed. And then when they are able to reopen again, they can pay taxes based on the number of machines and table games that they plan to open that following month. So we're doing what we can within our framework, but with respect to specific tax policy or rates, that's up to our legislature.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, that flexibility, and it's been interesting to see how the pandemic has led to a search for innovation, looking at how things can be done differently. And one thing we noticed was the opening to cashless payments in Nevada, because that's always been an issue that's maybe been on the agenda or on the back burner of the agenda, and now it's come to the forefront, obviously because of the trying to reduce contact between people. It's do you think that's something that might be developed further now? Is there? I mean, some people have speculated that we could see casinos in Vegas accepting payments by cryptocurrency and things like that. Is there room to sort of innovate in that sort of direction, do you think?
Before I talk about cryptocurrency, we actually, it was in February that the board actually considered and drafted regulations with respect to allowing debit cards at games, gaming machines or table games. And so I'm proud to say that we were already kind of on that trajectory, and then COVID really made everything expedite very quickly. Manufacturers have been very interested in this and wanting to come with new ideas, obviously, to be able to maybe make a wager through your phone or an e-wallet and things like that. Those are always great things that we're seeing a lot of the gaming conferences. But having an operator actually support that and say, yes, I want to try this, that was a little bit challenging. And I think we've seen more operators embrace cashless wagering. With respect to cryptocurrency, though, and things and Bitcoin, in Nevada statute, I just wanted to kind of confirm, you cannot use a credit card to gamble. You can use a credit card maybe to fund a wagering account to place a sports wagering bet, but you cannot use a credit card to gamble. So that's why we have to limit it to debit cards. And then actually US currency has to be used in order to gamble. And for taxing purposes, which obviously is very important to us because we collect them, you have to collect tax based on the value of what is wagered that day. So with the fluctuation of maybe the value and changing of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, that would definitely be a challenge in Nevada, unless, again, there's a statutory change made at the legislative level.
Do you see other ways that casinos can look to innovate? Are there other forms of innovation that you see people looking at that you think could be pushed forward as a result of the situation at the moment?
I'm actually I'm glad you asked that question, because the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, has a business school called the Lee Business School, and they're actually holding a $1 million challenge to focus on new innovative ways that we can make sure the gaming and hospitality industry can kind of bounce back from COVID. And it's anything from that we had, I can't remember the number of, I think it's about 250 submissions from 32 states and 10 different countries on different ways, whether it be disinfecting rooms or machines, or finding innovative ways to reduce contactless payments. And we're going to meet, if not in August, definitely in September, and kind of have a Shark Tank style or some type of, kind of vetting process for all of these wonderful innovative ideas, to see how these, wonderful entrepreneurs can think of different solutions on how Nevada can kind of bounce back with new innovative technologies post-COVID era. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those innovations. Or as far as innovations that have actually been submitted to the board, we've seen a couple of things on, chip cleaning or disinfecting, but nothing's really been approved. And because we're gaming regulators and I'm a lawyer by trade, I've definitely leaned on the health district a lot, because I didn't know the difference between sanitization and disinfecting, honestly, until March, when we had to close everything. So we definitely run those by our local health officials and medical professionals but I'm really hopeful that the UNLV Lee School of Business kind of competition will definitely bring to the forefront some solutions that a lot of our operators can use.
Excellent. It's certainly very interesting. We look forward to see what comes out of the project. It's fantastic. Just finally, something else we wanted to ask about is, there's obviously made headlines around the world. The past posting issue at Bellagio Casino at the start of the month, and there's been a lot of talk about whether their specific protocols should be drawn up to deal with that. It's something I think a lot of bookmakers have said it's something that all bookmakers face at some point in time. Is that something that the control board would look at putting in place?
Yeah, we actually have regulations in place. We have it's Nevada Gaming Commission Regulation 22060 that specifically says that a book shall not knowingly accept money or any type of equivalent unless the date and time that the outcome of the event can be determined or confirmed by reliable sources. And so those type of issues would fall within that regulation. Additionally, account wagering systems are supposed to specifically prohibit the acceptance of wagers after the post time. So that's a regulation 22145. And we also have minimum control standards through our audit division that discusses and addresses when sporting event wagers cannot be accepted after the start of an event unless some type of in progress notation is actually given at the time of the wager. So I'm comfortable that we do have regulations in place. I will not speak to that specific issue. Obviously, we're still kind of looking into that. Rescission of wagers do have to be approved specifically by the chair of the Gaming Control Board. There's another regulation that addresses that. So books can't unilaterally rescind a wager once they realize they make a mistake. That requirement makes them notify us when there are issues, and then we can kind of do our own investigation and see what happened and what caused that. And so I'm comfortable that our Gaming Control Board has had these regulations in place. Obviously, an unfortunate incident clearly had more attention than I would have liked. And I think that, due to the decreased number of sports and different offerings, it definitely put an unfortunate spotlight on the air.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much for your time, Sandra. Is there anything you would like to add before we finish on how you see the situation at the moment, or recommendations you would make to maybe regulators in other areas who are looking at how to sort of address the situation?
Sure. Well, I think we're building this pandemic playbook page by page as we go along. I hope to never have to use it again. But for Nevada, our non-gaming revenues have exceeded our gaming revenues for the last few years. And obviously what we're seeing because of the inability to hold conventions or have nightclubs and other type of entertainment, whether they be music or comedy, we've seen kind of it going back to the traditional gaming, gaming tables, gaming machines. We actually published our gaming revenues, and in some areas in Nevada, the gaming revenues for June of 2020 actually exceeded June of 2019. So in some areas, more people are gambling because there's just not enough to do. But I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. I think the socially distanced plexiglass, making sure employees are aware and now communicating to people, look, you need to spread apart, make sure your facial covering is worn the right way. I think as, it was very new to everyone June 4th, but now that we're almost about 2 months in, I think more customers know what they're going to have to expect until we get to a vaccine or some type of, healthcare breakthrough that helps minimize some of the symptoms here. And my recommendation to regulators, and, obviously some of us kind of talk and share experiences, is just to try to understand the science, always have a healthcare professional that's there that can kind of give us and help us with direction. And it's really important for us, and I'm very proud of Nevada, that we worked with our healthcare system to know that when we started inviting visitors back to our state, that we were able to care for them if they fell ill. And that was very important. It wasn't really something that I think we wanted to publicize. And I wouldn't say I can't offer the healthcare, but the healthcare systems and the hospitals did when we opened on June 4th. But we knew we had a testing program in place, and we knew that if someone found ill, there was a way to isolate them and actually house them at a non-gaming hotel where they could wait for their family or friends or stay there until they recovered. And so I think that I'm very happy that we haven't had to use a lot of those, but we've had those fail-safes and kind of plan Bs and Cs in place if unfortunately the virus, does not plateau and continues to spread.
Excellent, some great recommendations. Thank you. Well, thank you, Sandra. Thank you for your time, for joining us, and we look forward to speak again.
Wonderful. Thank you.